video. In this video, we're going to look at type 1 and type 2 errors. So no one is perfect. Even with lots of evidence, we can still make wrong decisions. In fact, when we perform a hypothesis test, we can make mistakes in two ways. If the null hypothesis is true, we reject it, that's a mistake. If the null hypothesis is false, but we fail to reject it, also a big mistake. Okay, which is worse? It depends on the context of the situation. So those two types of errors are known as type 1 and type 2 errors. Okay, type 1 is when we have a null hypothesis that's true and we reject it. And type 2 is when we have a null hypothesis that's false and we don't reject it. And we kind of have this little chart here to help you determine what's good and what's bad. So again, rejecting a null that's true is a type 1 error. In the medical field, that's a false positive. So that would be like if you went for a blood test and it turned out they told you were positive for COVID, but you really don't have COVID. That's a type 1 error, okay? And then if you reject a null that's false, that's okay and also interesting. If you do not reject a null that's true, that's okay. But if you don't reject a null when it's false, that's a type 2 error, and that's a false negative. So again, that would be like going to get a blood test and they tell you you don't have COVID, you're negative for COVID, but you really do have it. So you can think of different consequences of making a type 1 and type 2 error. If you think of it in terms of like the American court system, a type 1 error would be sentencing a guilty person or a person that's not guilty to jail. So you can imagine that's not a good thing. And then a type 2 error is taking someone that is guilty and letting them go free, which also has consequences. In a published study, they found the risk of a heart attack to be increased in patients taking the diabetes drug Avandia. The issue of the New England Journal of Medicine, in which that study appeared, also included an editorial that, in part, a few events either way might have changed the findings of myocardial infarction or for death from cardiovascular causes. In this setting, the possibility that the findings were due to chance cannot be excluded. What kind of error would the researchers have made if, in fact, their findings were due to chance? What would be the consequences of the error? Okay, so the first thing we need to do is figure out the null and the alternative. So if you think in terms of this diabetes drug, right? The null would say that the risk of taking it does not change. And the alternative would say that it does change. So what happened here is the researchers rejected the model and claim evidence of a higher risk, right? So in other words, they rejected a true null. Which, remember, that's a bad thing. Okay, so the risk didn't change with these patients taking the diabetes drug Avandia. So they made a type 1 error. What are some consequences? Well, one consequence I can think of is that if the drug Avandia really carried no risk, then the patients might be deprived of the benefits for no good reason. So if Avandia posed no risk, patients would be deprived. of the benefits. And you can probably think of some other consequences as well. But that's it for the video and the chapter. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.